The restaurant is elegant, a place of quiet luxury. Soft jazz hums through hidden speakers, blending with the murmur of conversation. The air carries a rich aroma: seared steak, aged wine, fresh herbs. Every table is set with polished silverware, crisp white napkins, and candlelight flickering off crystal glasses. This is not just any restaurant. It is exclusive, known for its high-profile guests and months-long waitlist. The kind of place where people don't just walk in. They belong, or they don't. At the entrance, a waiter stands behind a sleek wooden podium. His uniform is pristine: crisp white shirt, black vest, neatly pressed trousers. His posture is perfect: shoulders squared, chin slightly raised. A professional smile is fixed on his lips, but it's empty. Beneath it lies something colder: superiority. He surveys the room with quiet arrogance, his eyes scanning each guest. Some he greets with warmth, offering slight bows, a respectful nod. Others he barely acknowledges, his tone shifting subtly, a quiet reminder of their place. The front door swings open. A black customer steps inside. They are well dressed: tailored suit, polished shoes, an expensive watch glinting under the chandelier's glow. They carry themselves with ease, confident but respectful. Their presence demands no special treatment, only what is fair. The waiter's expression flickers. A small, almost imperceptible shift. His eyes move over the customer, taking in every detail. His smile remains, but it tightens at the corners. The restaurant hums on, unaware. Plates clink, soft laughter drifts through the air. No one realizes what's about to unfold, but the waiter does, and so does the customer. The customer steps forward, stopping at the podium. They offer a polite nod. "Table for one, please." The waiter's smile doesn't falter, but his hesitation is obvious. His eyes flick over the customer, taking them in, assessing, judging. His fingers tap against the podium as if considering. Then finally, he exhales and tilts his head. "I'm sorry, sir," he says, his tone light but dismissive. "We're fully booked tonight." The customer's brow raises slightly. Their eyes shift past the waiter, scanning the room. Several tables sit empty, freshly cleaned, silverware neatly arranged, wine glasses sparkling. The customer gestures toward them. "Are you sure? I see quite a few open tables." The waiter barely glances. His expression shifts into something resembling sympathy, but it's a mask. Thinly veiled condescension. "They're reserved," he says simply. The customer doesn't move. They watch the waiter carefully, studying him the way he had studied them moments ago. "Every single one of them?" The waiter's jaw tightens. His patience, already thin, frays at the edges. "Yes, sir," he says, the words sharp now. "All of them." The customer exhales, slowly, controlled. They don't argue. They don't raise their voice. Instead, they press their lips together and shift their weight slightly. A silent challenge. Then the door behind them opens. A couple enters, casually dressed, nowhere near as polished as the customer. The woman is laughing at something her partner just said, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The moment the waiter sees them, his entire demeanor shifts. His smile brightens, genuine this time. "Welcome," he greets, voice warm and inviting. "Right this way." Without hesitation, he grabs 2 menus and leads them past the customer, straight to one of the empty tables, one of the reserved ones. The customer watches in silence, their jaw tightening. The waiter doesn't look back. He seats the couple, exchanging pleasantries, making them feel at home. Then, finally, he returns to the podium. He finds the customer still standing there, still waiting, still watching. For the first time, the waiter looks uneasy. The customer exhales through their nose, slow and steady. They don't speak right away. They simply let the moment stretch, the tension simmering just beneath the surface. Then finally, they speak. "I see." Just 2 words, calm, measured, and yet somehow heavier than anything else said that night. The waiter swallows. The restaurant continues to hum around them, but now there's something different in the air. Something unspoken, something waiting to unfold. The customer doesn't move. Their hands rest in their pockets, their shoulders relaxed, but there's a quiet intensity in their gaze. "I'd like a table," they say again, their voice steady. The waiter sighs dramatically, shaking his head like he's dealing with a child. He leans one hand on the podium, letting out an exaggerated breath. "Sir, I've already told you," he says, voice louder this time. "We're fully booked. I don't know what else you want me to say." A few nearby diners glance over, sensing tension. A couple in the corner pauses mid-conversation, their eyes darting toward the podium. Others shift in their seats, pretending not to notice. The customer stays firm. "I'd like to speak to the manager." The waiter lets out a short, humorless chuckle. He tilts his head, amused. "Oh, really?" His smirk grows as he straightens his posture. "Well, I am the manager." A hush settles. A clink of a fork against a plate, the rustle of a napkin being unfolded. A chuckle escapes from a nearby table, someone entertained by the spectacle. The customer's jaw tightens, a flicker of frustration breaking through. They take a slow breath, steady, controlled. The waiter leans in slightly, his voice dropping low, sharp as a blade. "Listen," he murmurs. "People like you don't fit here." Silence. The words settle, heavy, suffocating. The customer doesn't flinch. Their face remains unreadable, but their fingers curl slightly into their palm. A woman at a nearby table exhales sharply. A man in a suit looks away, uncomfortable, but no one speaks. The waiter leans back, crossing his arms. His smirk is gone now, replaced by impatience. "Do yourself a favor," he says, voice still low but firm. "Just leave. Don't make this harder for yourself." The customer exhales, but their eyes remain locked onto the waiter. Steady, unwavering. The air in the restaurant feels different now. The waiter notices, his smirk twitches just slightly, but he doesn't know yet. He doesn't realize that in just a few moments, everything is about to change. A voice cuts through the thick silence. "Is there a problem here?" It's calm, steady, but there's an authority in it that makes the entire room pause. The waiter freezes. His smirk vanishes instantly. His posture stiffens, shoulders drawing up in tension. A well-dressed man steps forward from the back of the restaurant. Dark suit, polished shoes, a presence that commands attention without effort. His expression is unreadable, but his eyes are sharp. The owner. The customer turns slowly, meeting his gaze. The owner's eyes shift between them, then land on the waiter. He studies him for a moment, reading everything in the tightness of his stance, the way his fingers clench slightly at his sides. His voice is even. "What's going on here?" The waiter opens his mouth, but for the first time, words don't come easily. He lets out an awkward laugh, then quickly shakes his head. "Oh, just a misunderstanding," he says, his voice forced, too casual. "Nothing serious." The owner doesn't react. He just lifts an eyebrow, waiting. The waiter shifts uncomfortably. "I was just trying to explain to this gentleman that we're fully booked tonight." The owner's eyes flick toward the dining area, at the empty tables, at the newly seated couple, laughing softly over their menus. His gaze darkens. Finally, he looks at the customer. His expression softens slightly, but his tone remains neutral. "What happened?" The customer's hands are still in their pockets. They tilt their heads slightly, considering the question. Then, calmly, they begin to speak. "I walked in and asked for a table," they say, voice even. "I was told the restaurant was fully booked." The owner nods once, listening. "I pointed out the empty tables. I was told they were reserved." Another nod. Then a couple walked in. No reservation. They were seated immediately. The words linger in the air. More heads in the restaurant turn, attention fully locked onto the exchange now. The owner doesn't interrupt. His expression remains unreadable, but something shifts behind his eyes. The customer continues. When I asked for the manager, I was told that they nod toward the waiter, was in charge. The owner's brow twitches, just slightly. He remains silent, allowing them to finish. And when I pressed further, the customer exhales, controlled, measured. He told me that people like me don't fit here. A sharp inhale from somewhere in the room. A woman at a nearby table grips her fork tighter. A man in a suit clears his throat, looking away. The owner's expression finally changes. His jaw sets, lips pressing into a thin line. Slowly he turns to the waiter. His voice, still calm, now carries an edge. Is that true? The waiter swallows hard. His mouth opens, then closes. His face has lost all its color. He lets out a weak chuckle. I think maybe there's been a miscommunication. The owner doesn't blink. The waiter shifts. His hands fidget slightly against his vest, his confidence unraveling. I thought maybe they were lost, he blurts out. I didn't mean anything by it. The excuse falls flat. The restaurant is completely silent now. Every diner is watching. Some look uncomfortable, some furious, but no one is looking at the waiter with sympathy. The owner's voice drops, steady, unforgiving. So you decided to embarrass them instead? The waiter doesn't answer. His throat bobs as he swallows. The owner sighs, rubbing his temples briefly before lowering his hand. When he speaks again, his words are final. This is unacceptable. And suddenly, the waiter realizes this is not going to end the way he thought it would. The owner doesn't move. His gaze stays locked onto the waiter, sharp and unwavering. Is this true? His voice is calm, but there's no softness in it anymore. The waiter lets out a nervous chuckle, the sound forced and unnatural. He shifts on his feet, glancing around like he's searching for an escape. I think this is being blown out of proportion, he says quickly, his tone light, almost playful, as if he can still brush it off. It was just a misunderstanding. The owner doesn't react. His expression remains unreadable, his patience running thin. The waiter clears his throat, scrambling for an excuse. I thought they were lost, he blurts out, voice uneven. Maybe looking for somewhere else, and I was just trying to help. The owner tilts his head slightly. So you decided to embarrass them instead? Silence. The waiter opens his mouth, but no words come out. A drop of sweat forms at his temple. His hands fidget against the hem of his vest. The owner exhales, turning slowly. He scans the room, his eyes moving over the diners. Did anyone else witness this? For a moment, no one speaks. A few guests shift in their seats, eyes darting away, hesitant. The tension in the room is suffocating. Then, finally, someone clears their throat. A man near the corner table raises a hand slightly. Yeah, he says, voice cautious but clear. I saw it. The owner turns toward him, waiting. The man hesitates, then sighs. He refused to seat them, then let another couple in right after. He said the tables were reserved, but they clearly weren't. Another diner, a woman near the bar, nods. It was uncomfortable to watch. A third voice chimes in. And then he said they didn't fit here. Murmurs ripple through the restaurant. A few more nods. Quiet agreement. The waiter's face has lost all its color. He swallows hard, his breathing shallow. The owner turns back to him. His eyes are tired now, his disappointment evident. He rubs his temples for a brief moment before dropping his hand. Then he looks at the customer. I deeply apologize. His voice is steady, sincere. This should never have happened. The customer holds his gaze, unreadable for a moment. Then slowly they give a small nod. The owner gestures toward a premium table near the window. Please, he says, allow me to personally serve you. The tension in the room shifts, but the weight of what just happened still lingers. The waiter sways slightly, knowing this is the moment everything unravels. He isn't wrong. Because the owner isn't done yet. The waiter stands frozen, his face pale, his confidence shattered. His fingers twitch slightly at his sides, his chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. He can feel the weight of the entire restaurant on him now, the eyes of the diners, the whispers, the judgment. This isn't how this was supposed to go. The owner, still standing firm, exhales deeply. Then, he turns back to the waiter. "You're fired." The words land like a hammer. Final. Absolute. The waiter's eyes widen. He blinks rapidly, as if trying to process what he just heard. "Wait, what?" He lets out a shaky laugh, looking around, searching for someone, anyone, to defend him. "Sir, come on! It was just a joke!" The owner's gaze sharpens. His voice cuts through the space between them. "A joke?" The restaurant falls completely silent. The owner takes a step closer, his expression cold, unyielding. "Racism isn't a joke." The words hang heavy in the air. A statement, not an argument. The waiter swallows, his throat dry. I didn't mean it like that." His voice is weaker now, desperate. "I was just trying to—" "Enough." The owner's voice is firm, unwavering. The waiter's mouth opens, then closes. He looks around, hoping for some kind of support. A sympathetic glance, a nod, anything. But there's nothing. No one speaks, no one moves. Even the diners who had pretended not to notice before are watching now, their expressions unreadable. The reality sinks in. He is alone. The owner tilts his head slightly, as if waiting for him to process it. Then, he gestures toward the back. "Pack your things," he says, "now." The words slap across the waiter's chest like ice water. His fingers clench into fists. His jaw tightens. He shakes his head, muttering under his breath. "Unbelievable." Then, with one final glare, he turns and storms off. His footsteps echo against the polished floor. A door swings open, then slams shut. And just like that, he's gone. The tension in the restaurant lingers, thick and heavy. The owner exhales, running a hand over his jaw before turning back to the customer. His expression softens. "I truly am sorry," he says, quieter this time. "Let me make it right." The customer studies him for a moment. There's still tension in their shoulders, the remnants of everything that just happened still clinging to the air around them. Then slowly, they nod. The owner gestures toward the premium table. "Please, allow me to serve you personally." The customer follows him to the table, sinking into the plush seat. A deep exhale. A breath they hadn't realized they'd been holding. The owner steps away briefly, returning with a menu. "Order anything you'd like. It's on the house." The customer finally smiles. It's small, but it's real. For the first time that evening, they feel seen, respected. The restaurant is still quiet. The other diners are still watching, still absorbing everything that just happened. Then, slowly, softly, someone claps. A single clap, hesitant at first. Then another, and another, until the entire room joins in. A slow, steady applause. Not loud, not exaggerated, but meaningful. The customer glances around, their expression unreadable for a moment. Then they nod slightly, acknowledging the moment. The owner places a hand over his heart in silent sincerity before stepping back to give them space. The night resumes, but something has shifted. A wrong was made right, and justice was finally served.